Hello and welcome to the Matchbook NFL Betting Podcast. Now, Jay Gruden may have got his P45 this week, but we sure as hell ain't getting rid of our guys because there are so many winners coming out of this podcast right now. 21 in the last 3 weeks. Long may it last, so no pressure at all, gentlemen. Introducing my panel as ever. The top left of your screen, Drew Dinsick. The bottom left, Brad Allen. And on the bottom right, for the first time this week, Adam Chernoff, because you're late to the podcast, is Adam Chernoff. Right, guys, I want one quick take from another profitable week, week 5. Drew, what are you taking away from last week?
Biggest takeaway is, when we did the preseason preview show, one of the things we really tried to hammer home was have a network, have some good like-minded people to talk things out with. And when we did this show 1 week ago, I had 7 plays on my card. We talked through the Packers game and the Raiders game.
Yep.
And I was like, you know what? There is a really sizable advantage here on these underdogs. I'm going to go back and give those games another look. And sure enough, I was like, you know what? I'm playing those money lines. Last 2 added to my cards, both came through. So that just kind of goes to show sort of the power of, talking through some of the angles that you're seeing and hearing other people's perspective and helping, broaden your handicap that way. I thought that was pretty huge last week.
Good, man. Brad Allen, you put me onto the Broncos. Thanks for that. What was your general takeaway from last week?
One thing we're seeing is the odds makers or the market can't seem to make some of these spreads high enough. I mean, it seems like every week these double-digit favourites just keep covering. It was New England and the Eagles this week. So, I mean, is there a number high enough? Are we missing out on value by not backing these? Are kind of models built on the last few years broken? Is parity gone? I don't know, maybe.
Yeah, maybe the models are broken. That could be the way we're looking at it. Adam Chernoff, good weekend. Vikings, big one for you.
Yeah, Daniel Jones is who we thought he would be against a reasonable defense. I think Brad's point was spot on, too, where we're starting to look at some of these prices at the extremes, the top and the bottom, and there's a lot of questions to be asked. But week 5 through the NFL, it's been a pretty weird season overall with movements and results coming through. So we'll see if that was just a sort of a 5-week sample or if things are going to sort of correct themselves as we go forward.
Also, guys, before we move on to this week, how good was that under on Sunday night? Jeez, that was one of the better calls.
Well, it was a bit of a concern in the first half, let's be honest.
A little bit, yeah.
A moment there where it got a little bit dicey.
Sorry, go.
I must admit, watching the YouTube highlights on Monday morning, like you said, that second quarter, I was like, this is kind of a bit dodgy. And Brad, you wanted to come back in.
You said we had 21 winners last couple of weeks, Sully. Is anyone counting our losers?
Oh, no, we're counting them. But we're still in profit. I think it's like 21 out of maybe 29, that kind of way. Roughly. I think if we're batting it,
just a cool 75%.
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
Totally sustainable, completely sustainable.
Okay, if we keep it in the 60s, we're happy enough. Even 54, 55. Right, let's move on to this week. We're really setting ourselves up for a massive fall here, guys. Other winners, but whatever. We shall move on to Monday Night Football. The Detroit Lions head into Wisconsin, the Green Bay Packers, Lambeau Field. Current betting at Matchbook, the Green Bay Packers 1.5, Detroit Lions 2.98 on the money line. Detroit Lions are getting a 4-point start, 1.93, and the total is 46.5. Brad Allen, I will start with you here first, mate. You were on the Packers plus 3.5 last week. Does it carry over to this week?
It does not. I have backed the Lions plus the points, and I think they are a nice play still at 4. So, I mean, to start with, I think the Lions might be the best team in the North here. I mean, they're 8-9 to 1 to win the North, and if they do win, then I'm going on several holidays because I've been backing them all season now. So if we just look at their offensive metrics to start with, for the season, Detroit's success rate 49%, Green Bay at 45%. If we just look at passing, Detroit going at 7.2 yards per pass, 49% success rate. Packers down at 43% success rate, 6.4 yards per pass. So that they've kind of changed up this Lions offense under Darrell Bevell, throwing deeper. They've got the deepest depth of target in the league so far, those are the most efficient passes, which we like to see. And then, so I think we've probably got the better offense here. Although, obviously public perception wouldn't have it that way, but the stats we've seen so far this season. And then defensively, the Packers are probably slightly ahead in defensive metrics. I think they're about 12th to 9th on Football Outsiders DVOA. But Detroit have actually had the third most difficult schedule compared to the Packers who have the ninth most difficult. And I mean, you kind of watch that Kansas City game where Detroit were down their two top corners and they were still all over that Chiefs passing offense, was shutting it down, playing some good strong man coverage. So Green Bay should be without Devontae Adams again. It's expected he's going to miss this, and they were pretty beat up against the Cowboys. Safety Donnell Savage went down. Zadarius Smith was in and out with a knee injury. I don't know how sore he's going to be. Their center is being evaluated for a concussion, and obviously Lions off a bye. You normally get an extra point for that. So this line is suggesting the Packers are clearly the better team. And as I've kind of laid out, I think they're the healthier. I think the Lions are the healthier team and possibly slightly better on a neutral.
True, Dinsick, what are you thinking on this agreement with Brad?
Well, for sure, we're going to have to get Brad a pencil for his ear if his fortunes really do come down to Matt Patricia winning the NFC North here.
Just for his holidays, too, not for anything.
Just
else.
for okay. Either way, if it's a lot to be, I think it's a lot to ask Matt Patricia to kind of keep this coaching performance up. He does do some things that I find tough to really fully buy into. The Lions at 6, I would have said probably the right side, 6.5, 7. At 4.5 now, I'm not interested in this line or this game at all. I could really see a lot of scenarios play out here where, where the Packers can get on the Lions early, can force them into, out of their, intended game plan, and put them on their heels. And then you have Stafford trying to, manufacture something and getting a little loose with the ball, throwing some picks. The secondary for the Packers was, widely embarrassed last week, even in a win, which was wild. And there was a lot of things about that Packers-Cowboys game that didn't really add up. Did not expect 4 rushing touchdowns for the Packers rushing attack. Did not expect the Packers rushing defense to be so solid and their pass defense to be so loose. So, this is a tough one for me, and I'm going to be sitting this one out.
All right, Adam Chernoff, you sitting out as well?
Most likely. I think if we go back, I think it was 2 weeks now, possibly 3. I said I was looking forward to this game as an opportunity, but potentially to fade the Lions. This price has opened up in an area where I absolutely can't do that. Now that it's moved, I mean, maybe I'm starting to think about it a little bit, but really not the number I was anticipating. Thought it would be a lot closer to where it is now, but even maybe closer to a 3 if Green Bay would have got embarrassed back-to-back weeks on primetime television. But Green Bay overall, they pulled a bit of a Seattle, outgained by 3.1 yards per play, and at one time they're up by more than 3 touchdowns in that game against the Cowboys. So box score-wise, it leaves a lot of questions about Green Bay. But where I think that this number definitely presented value, I think Brad got a nice number early in the week. If the Detroit Lions are going to put together an optimal game plan for the second week in a row, it's going to look a lot like what they did against Kansas City, which I thought they executed very well, and that was keeping the ball on the ground and taking advantage of that Chiefs rushing defense, which is probably the biggest weakness of any defense in the NFL. Packers defensively, I don't think personnel-wise they're the weakest, but how they line up in the formation, they continue to play dime against any team that wants to run the football. Cowboys weren't really able to run the football consistently because of the scoreline in that game and how out of hand it did, but they still averaged 5.8 yards per carry on the limited carries that they did. So we're seeing 2 weeks in a row against the Eagles and the Cowboys where the Packers don't want to change what they're doing defensively, and that's allowing teams to move the football. So if Detroit is sort of naturally going to play into that game plan, we're probably looking at a lower variance game overall, which when you're getting 6 points, as Brad took earlier in the week, I mean, that's a really, really good number to grab, just considering how this game state might play out. Maybe more questions starting to grow for me on the Packers. Still far and away the best team in the first 15 plays of the game. From expected points, from yards per play, however you want to look at it. But after that, they still continue to fall off of a cliff. So not much of a believer in the Detroit coaching staff at all. But I think Green Bay has equal sort of questions starting to build with them on the coaching staff as well, making those adjustments later in the game. So just a bit of an ugly game overall, one I'm probably going to sit out of. But I get the movement, and I get why people were looking at taking this number earlier in the week where it opened.
Yeah, Brad, just before we move on, so what kind of number did you get? And look, we're looking at 4 currently. Where are you thinking on this one, Brad?
See, I took 4.5.
Okay.
I would take 4 for 2/3 of a unit or whatever.
Yeah.
I probably wouldn't take 3.5.
Okay, sounds good. By the way, I know exactly where Brad goes on holidays. Last year, I think, Brad, did you go to Cancun 1 week around Christmas and then you went to Indonesia something a week later?
I went to Antigua for a week and then Indonesia for a couple of weeks. Yeah.
Yeah, you see. So, guys, like this is this is big game stuff here with Brad Allen. When he goes on holidays, all right? So, yeah. Roll on mattress Patricia and Detroit Lions to pay for your holidays, Prof. Pittsburgh Steelers and Los Angeles Chargers is Sunday night's fair. Let's have a look at the betting currently on Matchbook. You can back the Chargers at 1.38, fresh from defeat to those Denver Broncos. 3.52 to Pittsburgh Steelers, and the main points for the 6.5 at the moment. 1.96 are the Chargers. 41.5 is the total. Drew Dinsick, I'll start with you first. I listened to your pod on Monday, Deep Dive podcast, so I kind of have already a bit of a head start in this one. But for everyone else who didn't listen to that podcast, which side are you on here?
So I've pivoted a little bit.
Okay.
And this is going to be a good game. Actually, of all the ones across the card, I'm most excited about this. Haven't talked to any of you guys about it, so I'm interested in some feedback. I thought Hodges, when he came in, watching it live, I watched a lot of that. And again, NFL totally tried to throw a fast one on us, putting 10 games at the same time last week. So you really couldn't pay attention to what was going on. Really puts you in a disadvantage when you start to handicap the following week. I happened to watch a lot of that Pittsburgh Ravens game, and I got to tell you, in the first moment they take Rudolph out, I was like, "Oh yeah, great." Rudolph wasn't playing that great, and Rudolph didn't play great in the small sample we got where he filled in for Roethlisberger. But I was still like, okay, well, I don't even really know who the third stringer is here. Who are they bringing in? They're bringing the guy Hodges. Had never heard of him before. I was like, oh, well, this is done.
So you're saying you have not watched any Samford FCS games? Huh?
I have no.
You call yourself a fan?
I don't know. I don't watch much college football anyway, and when it comes to FCS, I really don't watch much college football. So I was like, oh, this is over. But I got to tell you, it was a little more lively with the ball than Rudolph in this kind of the handful of passes that I saw. And if it weren't for a pretty spectacular defensive play, Humphreys knocking the ball out of the receiver's hands and recovering it, and after a miraculous bounce, that was just an incredible play. I don't know if the Ravens pull off that victory. And so I was thinking, okay, well, with the week to prepare and on the road, this guy that I've never heard of, he's going to be terrible. The Chargers are a perfect buy low spot. Like, they're a vastly more talented team. This Steelers defense, I still don't believe in them. Like, this is going to be a great look for the Chargers. And then so I said, I better get to know this Duck Hodges guy a little bit better. Watch some of his films, specifically watch some of his tape from his performance against Florida State last year. And he's kind of good, I have to say. He can sling it. And with the receiving talent that they have on that team, and with the likelihood that they're probably going to be playing from behind against the Chargers, and the Chargers have some huge limitations and holes in their defense right now from injuries and from personnel. It's kind of a boomer bust team overall. I think this plays easily to an over. And after kind of going through the tape on Hodges, I was like, okay, this guy can score. This guy's going to be able to move the ball. This guy's not going to be running the dink and dunk Mason Rudolph offense. He's going to be able to take shots in the middle to intermediate range down the field. I was like, okay, well, I would expect that the Chargers are going to, they're going to bring out their best. This is their save their season kind of game at home on prime time. Like, we gotta bring out our best kitchen sink type of game. So the Chargers are going to score. I think the Steelers have potential to score. So I went to the market thinking, okay, we're going to see like a 44, 45. It was 41.5. And I'm like, wow, that is really, really, really giving a ton of respect to two defenses that I think have major issues. Last week's total was low with Chargers and Broncos. But if you go back through the last several seasons, those teams know each other very well. They play each other tough year over year. You have lots of examples where there's 50 points a game for the Chargers and then 35 for the game against the Broncos, and then back up to 50. So this seems like a good spot for both offenses to get right. I love the over 41.5 here. I actually sold up to 42. I don't think I would sell even higher and take an even juicier number because I think this gets into the high 40s pretty comfortably.
Yeah, well, currently a matchbook, you can back the over 41.5 at dead on even money at 2.0. Adam Chernoff, have you been doing much research on Devlin Hodges this week? Because let's face it, like Drew said, if you're an FCS quarterback and you get drafted, well, he's undrafted. Is he 6th, 7th round, something like that? But he's still, to get a chance in the NFL, you got to have something about you.
Well, I don't know how much of a downgrade it is from Mason Rudolph, assuming that he's for sure not able to go, still in the protocol this morning as we record this.
He can't play.
I don't see it happen. No, that was as ugly of a hit as you've seen, and I like my big hits, but that was pretty bad. So I think it's safe to assume that Hodges is good to go this game. What was interesting, and I hate to always backtrack and stuff like this, but if we go back to the Browns going on the road to face the Ravens, we said that Cleveland could potentially sort of back their way into a successful offensive performance, and they certainly did. And last week, much of the same with Pittsburgh. With Rudolph, he was consistently among the lowest air yards. They were keeping everything very conservative, implemented the Wildcat, but we look at what they did against the Ravens defense. They were over 10 air yards per throw for both Rudolph and for Hodges. Hodges wasn't necessarily charted officially, but if you look at his passing map, half of his passes, he only threw 9. So 5 of them were 10 yards or further down the field in terms of attempt. He completed 4 of them. So they were certainly stretching the field out much more than we have. I don't know if that's Mike Tomlin finally coming around and making a change, or if that is just the Ravens secondary allowing teams to do that. If they're matching up against the Chargers, you're going to think that they're going to want to do the exact same thing. And I'm not making these names up, but the Chargers very likely to start in the secondary people named Roderick Teamer, Rayshon Jenkins, and Michael Davis.
Yes.
Again, those aren't names that are made up, but they grade out 80th, 71st, and 43rd respectively at their position.
Sure. Okay.
When you're thinking that there's 32 teams and potentially just 2 at their position, those numbers don't sound very good overall. Against the defense in the Chargers, overall success rate 24th and 26th against the rush and the pass. Steelers defensively, their secondary leaving some concerns as well. That pass rush has been decent at times. Rivers very good against throwing anytime they bring the extra blitz. So a bit of an interesting game plan from that perspective. But I'm just curious about this movement overall. You see the adjustment up. The Chargers get walked over by the Broncos, and then the Steelers outgain the Ravens by 1.5 yards per play, end up losing. And we see the number go the other way. So a bit of an interesting movement from that perspective. Still a bit undecided in this one, but interesting movement nonetheless.
Brad Allen, you were more than happy to fade the Chargers last week. And let's be honest, you're the anti-Mason Rudolph person on this podcast, and rightly so at the moment. You are proving right. So surely you're on Pittsburgh plus 6.5 here.
I've not bet the game because I obviously have no idea about this quarterback whatsoever. But if Drew is to be believed and he's somewhat competent, then I think
I believe him.
Cracking bet, because so if we just look at strength of schedule this season, the Chargers have had the 4th easiest, and obviously they're still playing crap, and then Pittsburgh has had the 2nd hardest. If you think about who they've played, it's the Patriots and Tom Brady, it's Russell Wilson, and Seahawks, it's the 49ers in there, it's the Ravens who are a good outfit as well, and they're still putting up very good metrics. So if we take passing efficiency, so adjusted net yards per attempt on offense and defense, adjust them for the strength of schedule, Pittsburgh actually come out 4th in the league behind Green Bay, New England, and Kansas City, right? So, I mean, that's quite a strong opponent adjustment because they've not been that good. And anyway, down near the bottom, at 25th in the league, is the LA Chargers. So based on some of the numbers these guys are putting up and against who they're playing, Pittsburgh's the better team. And now we know that LA has 0 home field advantage. Pittsburgh fans travel well. It's going to be like Denver last week, where there's more Pittsburgh fans in there. So can we say that this Chargers team, which is just been gutted by injuries, you know, that defense was one of the best in the league last year. They're all gone. They're all just destroyed. They're down to a 3rd string who's all over the place. There's no weapons left. There's no one to block for Rivers. He can't move.
Yeah.
I think this is a very poor team, and this Pittsburgh team is better than it looks because they've been playing a very tough schedule. So I think Pittsburgh plus 6.5 could be quite a strong bet.
sound like a very live underdog. 191 rushing yards, whatever about the secondary, 191 rushing yards the Chargers gave up to the Broncos last week. So I expect a big game for James Conner. Right, let's move on to one of the tastier ties on Sunday night. San Francisco 49ers head into the LA Coliseum to take on the Rams. Current betting at match, both the money line, the 49ers 2.54, the Rams 1.61. Handicap is kind of falling a bit here, guys. 3 is the main line at the moment. Rams 1.9 minus 3 and 50.5 is the total. Brad, I will stay with you for this one, sir.
Yeah,
you're very much in disagreement with one of the panelists, who we will get to in a second. But make the case for your side in this one first of all.
I'll be interested to hear the opposition here, because this line again, it suggests the Rams are the better team. And I've absolutely no idea what has happened on the field this year to make anyone think that. So San Francisco, 7.7 yards per pass to 6.9 for the Rams, 50% pass success rate to 48% for the Rams, yards per rush 5.2 to 4.2 for the Rams. San Fran's defense second in DVOA to 17th for the Rams. So, I mean, just better across the board. And then I also think the matchup favours them. You know, I've spoken many times about the weakness and the interior of the Rams defensive line this year, and not offensive line this year, and the offensive line as a whole. Well, the San Francisco defensive front is one of the best in the league. You know, they've just shredded everyone they've played. So yeah, I think Goff is going to have pressure in his face all day, and historically he's really struggled with that. He's not the most mobile chap. So yeah, I think Shanahan's going to roll up and down the field on this Rams defense, and then they're going to just release the dogs on Jared Goff. But I'm interested to know what I've missed.
So before I get to your opposition on this one, what's the angle here? Are you going to take the 3.5 at 1.87, or are you going to take the +3 at 2.04, or are you going to back them on the money line at 2.54?
I don't have a particularly strong preference. Stick a unit on both would be my vote.
Okay. Now, Adam Chernoff, the floor is yours. Brad has set the scene for the 49ers, but you're on the Rams.
Yeah, I'll go the other way here.
Okay.
I look at the 49ers, the great team so far through 4 weeks. They put together some fantastic numbers. I've got a couple questions about them defensively. When you look at the efficiency numbers, that really takes into account the other opponent's full body of work, right? But if we look at sort of the timeliness in which they face the opponents, overall the quarterback slate, you're looking at Jameis Winston, Andy Dalton, Mason Rudolph, and Baker Mayfield. But if we sort of add that timeliness element into it, Jameis Winston in week 1, all of his playmakers were dealing with the flu. Andy Dalton in week 2, it was the first game under Zach Taylor on a short week of preparation. Mason Rudolph in week 3 was making his first NFL start. And then on Monday Night Football, they get the extra week to prepare for Baker, who we now know has the lowest adjusted completion percentage in the NFL. So even though they've faced what is an easy schedule of opposing pass offenses, you can almost argue that it becomes pretty significantly easier looking at sort of that timely element within it. And if we sort of go back to establish a price point within these two teams, the look-ahead line in the summer, which, and I'll get to sort of why this isn't necessarily important, but 7.5, and then last week was 5.5, and now we're looking at a 3. Again, you can't take those into account as there's suddenly value on the Rams because that price has moved that far. But if we're sort of just evaluating the new information that's available within the market and equating that to what the current number is, you're really looking at the San Francisco 49ers drastically outperforming the Rams throughout the first 4 weeks of the season, which they have to an extent, but is it this large of an extent? And I think that's where sort of the question marks come in. And then, as Brad mentioned, Jared Goff, terrible under pressure. And I'll be the first one to jump in and say that that's absolutely the truth. I love to fade Jared Goff, but what gets really interesting is matched up against this 49ers defense in his career. If there's something that Goff struggles against, it's pressure. But if there's something else he really struggles against, it's passing into zone defenses. 49ers under Saleh play one of the highest rated of zone defenses. And if you look back at the matchups between Goff and this defense throughout his career, Sean McVay has made a very strong effort to take the ball out of his hands and keep the ball on the ground. Jared Goff has never thrown more than 28 pass attempts against this 49ers defense in his career. the 49ers have won all of those games comfortably. Not saying past success makes up for this one, but if we're looking at just the game plan perspective, the goal is to take the ball out of Jared Goff's hands, keep it on the ground, which is where the Rams as a team are most effective. It also goes against the biggest weakness of this 49ers defense, who's faced the easiest schedule of opposing rushers and only ranked 12th in success rate. So that number looks a lot worse. If you get this situation where the Rams are consistently running the football, controlling the game from that perspective, sets up well for easy throws for Jared Goff because the Rams concede everything underneath. Jared Goff, despite his pressure numbers being bad, he's throwing a lot of easy throws into large windows. And when you think about McVay using the mesh pattern that he really likes, the 49ers concede space underneath for him to find those routes. And if we look at something we saw Monday Night Football, the fullback, Juszczyk, was injured. He's used on 33% of running downs from the 49ers scheme, who play a lot of heavy personnel most frequently. If you don't stretch out the Rams and expose that slot weakness, which the 49ers don't do consistently, only run that personnel 30% of their plays, now you take out the lead blocker. They're running the football more than any team in the NFL at 57%. If you parse that out for neutral situations, still 54%, which is the league lead. So if you're looking at potentially a team without their lead blocker leading the way, affecting that run game, how does that slow down this offense? We talk a lot about Goff's numbers under pressure. If we look at adjusted completion percentage, Jimmy G, 2% worse this season than Jared Goff. I don't think that gets nearly enough attention. I'm looking at where this price was, where it is now. I'm seeing 3. That's a pretty significant movement for results that don't necessarily, I think, dictate that big of a swing. We're now putting these two teams pretty well on even level. Not sure that's the case. I think the Rams at 3 are aside for me this week.
Right, Drew Dinsick, settle it.
I'm on the Rams, and it's wild. Was waiting for this to open. I don't know what took so long. It was a little weird that they kind of sat on this for a couple hours before they went widely available with sort of the market-making books. But it is what it is, and it went up fast. And people, the early money was eager to back the Rams. And then as we are recording this, I'm seeing someone is hitting the Niners hard, and there's clearly resistance here on either side. So this is going to be probably the most interesting from sort of a who's backing what outcome of the week. I think this is drawing the most money and the most interest among the the sharper handicappers, which is always fun and exciting. I'm on the Rams mostly because I still have not seen Jimmy G put up a performance that I think is commensurate with being able to go score for score with what I expect this Rams offense will do to the Niners. I know that it's funny to hear our friend Brad Allen, who I know doesn't necessarily feel like defense matters all that much, to expect that the differentiating factor here would be the San Francisco defense. What I think is lost a little bit in the handicap is the Rams played on Thursday and the Niners played on Monday. Does that matter? Well, to this point in the season, it has mattered a lot, especially when you have a good coach. And when you have a coach like Sean McVay, who has, whose specific talent comes in when it comes to game planning, scheming, and, setting up how to attack his opponent and score points, having 10 days to prepare for the San Francisco defense, who he has abjectly owned. He has owned San Francisco since he has been a coach, in the Rams. You look at across the results, aside from the one that was the week 17 where they sat everyone before their first playoff appearance, he's scoring 40 points a game without really lifting a finger. As Adam mentioned, without even having Jared Goff, really air it out. They're scoring, consistently scoring in the high 40s against these guys, which is incredible. And on top of that, the Rams, I feel like they are going to have to make adjustments to using more 12 personnel to help, counteract the pass rush. I think they can do that. And I think potentially without Cooks, who may be missing this game with concussion, that does shift things a little bit to, okay, maybe we go a little bit heavier here. Maybe we do rely a little bit more on the run, and we buy Goff a little bit more time in passing down. So I think this all sets up there is a game plan to be crafted here, and there is time and preparation, to give McVay exactly that opportunity to craft this game plan. I think he continues his his general ownership in this very impressive head-to-head matchup here between Shanahan and McVay, two of the better, if not the two best young coaches across the NFL.
All right, Brad Allen, you have your hand raised. Fight back, sir.
Well, so I agree with Mr. Whale that the defensive metrics don't really matter. I would say these defenses are probably pretty equal. But as I kind of went through the metrics so far for the San Francisco offense are, I would say, significantly superior. And they've not really even been forced to play, if you know what I mean. Like they've run on 55% of their plays, which is obscenely high in this NFL. And they're actually losing expected points per run. They're minus 0.08 EPA per run. EPA per pass is plus 0.17. The Rams are down at 0.03. So San Fran is a lot better at passing the ball, and they've just not been forced to do it. No one can hang with them yet. Now, I think the Rams will score. So possibly one way around this all, it sounds like we all think the offenses are going to score, and I probably think 50.5 as it is. I think they're going to fly.
Hey, Prof, we've got to do something here because you're talking about the record taking earlier on, where we're keeping score of our results here now this season.
Yeah.
So we can't give out two selections. We can't tell listeners and viewers to back both sides because that's not really kind of fair. So guys, come on, put hands in the air now. You're in the quad box. Shall we go for the over 50.5 as the compromise bet here?
I can support
hands in the
air.
air.
Yes.
I can support that too.
Adam,
I support that. I support that. Yeah.
Okay.
Brad's taken it to me so far in the insights column, so I guess that will where it's going to be split up. But for video's sake, I'll agree with the over.
All right. Let's just take a compromise bet there because we can't record both. Right. Let's move on. That's going to be a cracker, by the way. That's a really good game to watch, I think, on Sunday evening. Let's move on to the Falcons at the Arizona Cardinals. By the way, guys, how the hell did my over get up with Arizona and Cincinnati? Arizona did everything they could as well to just not get this one up. What was it like, Adam? Like 5 trips to the red zone, 4 field goals, maybe 1 touchdown. Oh, it was nuts. Anyway, on to this week. I still think they're a pretty good team for an over, and we'll get to that in a second. Moneyline betting, the Falcons are a favorite here. How the hell the Falcons are favourite against anyone at the moment, even against Miami, is probably a bit of a stretch. 1.75 Falcons, Cardinals 2.27. Cardinals getting a 2.5 point start in the main handicap line at 1.99. 51 is the total. That opened at 47 was the look ahead line. And I'm pretty sure the likes of Adam Chernoff hammered it up to 51. Adam Chernoff, are you backing the over here?
Oh, complete green light on this one. It was 49.5, 50, 51. Yep. Absolutely. I mean, it's tough to believe. Like you said, though, just to touch on that one, we were texting back and forth. Before those couple scores happened late in the fourth quarter, that was like a 750, 800-yard game that had 28 points scored. So it goes to say a lot about the state of the red zone offenses. But believe it or not, in this matchup specifically, the defense that's playing without their number 1 and number 2 corners for the duration of the season thus far grades out higher in coverage than the Atlanta Falcons, who have this defensive guru, Dan Quinn, as their head coach. And I don't think we necessarily need to sort of push that any further. We all know that this team is struggling. They're waiting for him to be fired. This defense is horrendous. If you watch the Texans game, there was the drive to start the second half where Atlanta had the lead. And there was a point in time where this offensive line for Houston, which is widely acknowledged as having a lot of issues, Deshaun Watson was standing in the pocket, not even moving. And if you pause the screen, you can see the Atlanta Falcons pass rushers standing up. They're not even trying to get pressure. Yeah. They're just conceding these throws. But defensively, where this becomes concerning and favorable for the over, the Falcons are allowing 55% of passes to grade successful. That's second worst in the league. But this has become an above average schedule of opponents for the Falcons to face. So that 31st in the league looks a lot worse than it probably is. But from just a schematic standpoint, the one knock on the Falcons this year that you see is they're playing the same coverage over and over. They're not disguising anything, and they're extremely easy to read. They're also playing extremely soft coverage as well. So in terms of Kyler Murray having confidence, there's something that you want is the defense not to disguise their coverage, to play very consistently, and to be easy to read. The Arizona Cardinals, when that's really been the case, and you're looking towards sort of later in the game and a couple of the early weeks where defenses get a little more vanilla playing prevent, that's when he's really had a lot of success. So I think from Arizona moving the ball on the Falcons, not going to be an issue to do that. And then you flip things around. Tremaine Brock potentially out as well for the Cardinals. But then there was also 3 or 4 other depth guys at defensive back who are questionable or doubtful, which means the starting corners for the Cardinals could potentially be number 4 and 5 on the depth chart, going against Julio, Sanu, and Ridley. So the Atlanta Falcons have not had issues moving the football, 6th in passing success rate, and now you get it in the fast surface in Arizona against this secondary, which is injured. Again, they grade out 28th in coverage in terms of success rate. So we're looking at 2 defenses that are bottom 5 in success rate. We're looking at 2 offenses which have no problem moving the ball, coverages that are very easy to read. And what gets really interesting now, similar to what we saw with Cincinnati, Arizona, you look at volume of plays. Both of these teams are top 10 in plays run per game. In terms of pace as well, 2nd and 5th in neutral game state situations. So very similar to what we saw with Cincinnati, Arizona last week, where it was a similar case of 2 teams, high passing volume, playing very quickly. We're getting the same situation here. Volume versus these secondaries, it's just not going to hold up. Numbers too short where it is. You can go over 51.
Brad Allen, what are you thinking here? This is a tough one to be back in the unders.
Yeah, pretty much agree with what Adam said. There was one interesting thing I would add, that Kyler Murray's depth of target, it was about 10 yards in week 1, and then it dropped to about 5 and 6, weeks 2 and 3. Don't know if he didn't trust his protection or what, but then it was back up to 10 against the Bengals. And obviously he was running as well. So, yeah, I agree with Adam that they should put up some points. And obviously, I think the Falcons are going to carve up this Arizona defense that just doesn't really have any working defensive backs.
Yeah, I've watched the Cardinals quite closely the last couple of weeks. I think they need to probably get him running a bit more, actually, because his legs is a serious weapon.
Yeah.
Drew, what are you thinking on this one?
I think Adam made a pretty compelling case there. I almost played the Falcons this week just because this is kind of the ideal buy low spot for them. You have a young Arizona team that just got their first win. You have extreme limitations with their ability to stop the pass. So, but in the end, I didn't make a play here just because I find the Dan Quinn era to be frustrating, disappointing, and probably should be over. So I think in my heart, I'm hoping he loses and gets fired. But I do think at the
I think they've still got a pretty good offense, though, the Falcons, don't they? I think they do.
That's the thing.
Yeah, it's frustrating.
This offseason, I was like, they jettisoned Steve Sarkisian. It's like that problem solved. But clearly bringing in Dirk Cutter was a disaster. If anything, they've regressed, which is seemingly impossible because they were so frustrating and they have so many weapons. So I think the Falcons should cover. I think the over is a fair look, especially if you got in early before it got bet up. But I'm going to stay away from this one.
Okay, let's move on to the Philadelphia Eagles against the Minnesota Vikings. Drew, I'll stay with you for this one. Let's take a quick look at the betting, first of all. Money line here, the Eagles are 2.49. The Minnesota Vikings are 1.63. The Eagles are getting a field goal start, 2.02, 1.94. On the Vikings, -3, and the total is 44. Drew, fly Eagles fly for you?
Yeah, and I feel like I'm going up against some pretty serious opposition on this one. Obviously, the influential bookmakers have taken a stand paying this number where they did. If they had put it at 2.5, they probably would have gotten fairly balanced action. But I imagine at +3, people like me who are like, nope, the Eagles are contenders. They are alive in this game. They are out much better team overall than the Vikings. Why in the world would they be dogs? I think that in general, that sentiment is driving, a lot of sort of lopsided action here is my guess. But I can't, I've thought about it hard. I put my bet in early because I thought, this is going to go to +2.5, and I don't want to be sitting there like sad that I missed out on +3. No, you can still get +3, same price, no movement. So there's clearly not a great feeling about this, having gotten that bet in. And from a matchup standpoint, Kirk Cousins, of all the teams across the league, I feel like we know the Vikings better than we know any other team. We know Kirk Cousins' ability when he goes up against the top-tier opposition. He's just not great. Now, granted, he's got a pretty decent track record against the Eagles when he was mostly with the Redskins, but those Eagles teams weren't as good. And I think the Eagles, they had a get-right game on defense last week against sad, pathetic Luke Falk. And, to a degree, I would expect that they carry that momentum into this week. They're starting to get pieces back healthy. I don't expect Deshaun Jackson to play, but if he does, that would be a hell of a bonus. It's tough for me really to doubt the ability of Carson Wentz and the Eagles offense to score points and put pressure on Minnesota. And I don't totally believe that Minnesota's coaching staff has the right scheme and the right tools to answer. And, bottom line, this comes down to coaching and quarterback play for me. I don't believe in Kirk Cousins. I don't believe in Mike Zimmer. I know that Carson Wentz can get it done, and I know that Doug Peterson has Zimmer's number. He knows exactly what Zimmer wants to do on defense. Zimmer does not have strong adjustments. This could play out exactly the way we've seen this same song and dance play out between these two teams in the past couple of years. I would expect the Eagles to get the win.
Well, say in your defense, Drew, you're saying the market's not going with you, but the last couple of weeks it hasn't really gone with you as well. You've had the winner. So I wouldn't be jumping off that bandwagon all of a sudden. Brad Allen, any play in this one for you?
Yeah, I'm on the Eagles +3 as well. Like Drew, I jumped in early. Was sure this would. I still think this is going off mine at +2 at kickoff. NFL games, it kind of come down to the coach and the quarterback more often than not. And if it's Doug Peterson versus Zimmer, I don't think it's a real contest. You've got one who actually listens to the analytics, will go for it on fourth down. Yeah. It basically is an intelligent and thoughtful coach rather than just, we need to run the ball 55 times. And then obviously it seems like the uncertainty here is how the Vikings will attack, because obviously the Eagles are this kind of pass funnel defense. You get to their defensive backfield, they're missing quarterbacks all over the shop, whereas the defensive line is the strength. They can stop the run. So we don't know how the Vikings will attack. Will they be stubborn? We know they want to run the ball. Are they stupid enough that they're going to go, we're going to run the ball anyway? Or are they smart enough to go, Thielen and Diggs can absolutely cook this secondary if we let them? But so that is the uncertainty. I don't really know what they're going to do there. But back to the coach quarterback combo, we've got the much better coach, and then quarterbacks wise, Kirk Cousins, I think, as I can make out, is 5-25 against winning teams, which I know. I'm sure some analytically inclined people would scoff at that and go, it's not real. But it does seem like there's a real ceiling to his play that they just beat up on these bad teams like the Giants. And then when there's actual competition, when the pressure is put on them, he chucks a stupid interception. I do buy into that somewhat. And, just on the numbers, Wentz this season, a PFF grade of 90.4 compared to Cousins at 61.7. Wentz is about twice as many big-time throws and about half as many turnover-worthy plays. So he's just a better quarterback around, better coach. I'll take the field goal.
I love to Adam Thielen calls out Kirk Cousins last week, and then he gets 9-10 catches just because he starts bitching about it's the way to go. Because just keep throwing me the ball. It just shows you how easily led some guys in the league are. It's nuts. I'm not after timing here, but over 4.5 receptions last week on Thielen was one of the bets of the year. That is totally after timing. I know when I say I'm not after timing, totally after timing.
Just saying it's not after timing doesn't change it. Sully.
There you go. Exactly. Adam Chernoff, Eagles +3 for you. You looking elsewhere?
I can sort of pick a couple different things within this handicap, and it's really interesting because we go back now 2 weeks. I remember when the look-aheads for this week came out last week before the Vikings and Eagles played, and the one that stood out on the Week 6 card was Vikings -3, and it was looking and going, oh my God, what's going on here? And then you see the Vikings get bet up significantly against the Giants. The Eagles get bet up significantly against the Jets, and both of those results go heavily in favor of both of those teams. Now we get to a spot where this number is exactly where it was on the look ahead, and we haven't seen any movement whatsoever from it yet. A little bit of adjustment on the 3 from 1.95 down to what is 1.9, but nothing too significant in terms of that. So it's really set where the market had anticipated. And so to go back and sort of pick and choose spots within the last couple of games, I just feel like there's a much more accurate read on this. But you look at how these two teams match up. We know what the Vikings are going to do. They're going to run outside zone on about 55% of their snaps. But now they're going against the Eagles defense, number 1 defensive line and adjusted line yards. But they also forced the highest rate of negative plays. 32% of rushes against this Eagles defense have resulted in 0 or a negative gain for opponents. So you think about the Vikings potentially, after all these weeks of Dalvin Cook having success, now they get this huge challenge, and it's going to put them potentially in a lot of third and long situations, which is where you get Kirk Cousins against the pass rush. I mean, that in itself is a little bit problematic. As Brad mentioned, if you're going to take advantage of this Eagles defense, it's going to be through the secondary. So there is potential for that to happen, but you just wonder, from a play calling consistently stayed over 60, 70 plays, if the Vikings are going to frequently find them in longer down distances, becomes a little bit problematic. And you wonder how much of sort of a perception was created against this Giants defense, which was without their 3 starting linebackers, without a number of guys in the secondary, one of the worst secondaries overall in the NFL. We see the Vikings explode. That was sort of anticipated, and the market dictated that that was going to happen. So without anything returning to the market this week, that's interesting. From the Eagles side, I think what's going a little bit unnoticed is this offense in the big picture has actually struggled quite a bit. If we look in the last 3 weeks, they've had 3 sub 5.0 yards per play games, including 2 that went for 4.0 and 4.0 against the Lions and the Falcons. Last week against the Jets, just 4.5 yards per play, and that was without some key guys on defense for the Jets in that game as well. So Deshaun Jackson not likely to be in this game yet. He's accounted for, despite only playing in that first game, he's accounted for 20% of the explosive plays the Eagles have had this season. So it becomes a little bit interesting when you try to sort of think how they're going to move this ball against the Vikings defense, which I think getting a little bit disrespected from the market. So a bit of an interesting game. I think the line's set very well. I think the total's priced right as well, and we're not going to see anything too significant from the movement side on this one. But if I have to maybe lean towards the Eagles with the guys.
Seems to be a very efficient market, like you said, because they did open -3 and it's 44, and it's literally the exact same right now, which is kind of rare enough 3 or 4 days into the week. Right, one of the games the week that's probably, we're talking about markets, is a pretty fascinating one. And Brad Allen, let me start with you on this one. Saints and the Jags. So let's just get a kind of a quick overview of this. Jags open at -2.5 late Sunday night. Then the Saints get back to, I think it's to -1 on Monday, kind of late Monday, early Tuesday. Now we're back to the Jags -1, total 44.5, and obviously the money line is very tight. Brad, which side of this movement are you on? Because this is pretty fascinating, because bettors are obviously finding it hard to take an opinion on this one.
Yeah, I think there will be people toing and froing on this, because if you look at ELO models and anything which takes, you know, a more historical win-loss and points scored and against, you're going to be on New Orleans here, because, you know, they've been an excellent team for the past 3 years, whatever. But if you look at, you know, models that take into account, I don't know, they weight passing numbers this year, I think you're going to be on the Jacksonville side. So I was talking earlier about this adjusted net yards per pass differential weighted for opponent, and I've got Jacksonville up at 5th. Behind the 4 we talked about earlier: KC, New England, Green Bay, Pittsburgh, good teams, and I've got New Orleans down at 12th. And I think there's a pretty good argument to be made that Gardner Minshew is actually a better quarterback than Teddy Bridgewater at this point. So he's got a better PFF grade. Just trying to find this quickly. He's got a 74.8 PFF grade to 67 for Bridgewater. Much, you know, about double the big time throw percentage. Similar turnover worthy plays. And then it looks like we're going to get Jalen Ramsey back for the Jags this weekend, which I think will be quite big. So he's at practice today, I believe, and I think the hope is they'll play. And what I think that will enable the Jags to do is basically play from behind less often. So they've been trailing the 4th largest amount of time of all teams in the league. And they've not really been running play action that much, about 13% play action. But actually, when they have run play action, he's had one of the best passer ratings in the league, Minshew. I mean, he's been pretty strong all over the place. But so I think the hope is it's John DeFilippo here, who we know he's quite advanced. He was with the Eagles, so he should run more play action if he has the chance. The hope is that the Jags defense is better than it's been, because they replaced Ramsey with some trash corner who was getting picked on. And then the Jags pass defense is probably better than the Saints. And then I think we might have a better quarterback as well. And,
even after last week, Teddy Bridgewater,
he
pretty
was,
decent week,
he was a lot better. I was against the Saints because Bridgewater wasn't throwing downfield. I think he had four passes beyond 20 yards downfield.
Yeah, I think he may just have remembered that he had Michael Thomas, one of the top 5 receivers in the league. That might as well throw him the ball. He's pretty good.
Yeah, and then he matched that literally in that one game. So there's definite advances there, but I think it might be a bit different from the Bucks, who are still quite bad defensively, I think, in the Superdome compared to the Jags defense on the road. I think you might find that quite a significant difference.
Adam Chernoff, like I said, fascinating market. Have you come down on either side in this one?
Yeah, this is certainly the spot for handicappers, right? We saw that last week with a lot of appetite to oppose the Saints. We're seeing it this week again. They put together a couple, we can call them fraudulent wins. Last week they showed up against the Bucks. Bridgewater, 7.3 air yards, 9.6 yards per pass, by far his highest. He was among the worst for those couple starts he made prior. Opened up against the Bucks, but you look at the Saints and these wins they've put together, 20th, 24th, and 21st with their opponents in passing success rate. Now they go on the road to face the Jags, who are 11th. Ramsey returns, so it's a significant step up in passing defense that they're going to face. Really, the Jags can make them one-dimensional and rely on Kamara, which obviously shortens the game, reduces the variance within it. But you look at the Jags overall, their rushing game, 28th in rushing success rate, and a lot of people will point to the numbers for Fournette. He's had 3 carries, which have accounted for 60% of his yards in the past 3 games where he's really broken out. So I've got some concerns about the Jags being able to run the ball against this Saints run defense. So I think that's going to be challenging. I'm not sold on Minshew just yet. I'm not sure he should really dictate this sort of price point. But you do get the Saints. The Bridgewater's played 3 games, all on turf between Seattle and New Orleans. Now you get them on grass in the heat. They become a very different team from a speed perspective. I think it's another game that's priced quite well. I understand why there's interest in the Jacksonville Jaguars. I would not be looking to back the Saints, but I'm not sure that I'm going to get over and back the Jaguars in this one. Most likely stay away.
Drew, stay away for you as well. Have you played this one?
I took a swing on the under here. I think under 44 is a fair look. To me, I think we see 2 offenses that are struggling in the red zone. And I think we see 2 defenses that are, that have the ability to make it tough on each other to score touchdowns. This is a field goal, field position type of game. I think 44 is going to be tough to come by here points wise. I would expect that whichever team can get into the 20s likely gets the win here. And just given what Christian McCaffrey was able to do, what he was able to do against the Jaguars defense last week was pretty impressive, and I wouldn't be surprised if Alvin Kamara is kind of your fantasy star of the week, carrying the Saints to another improbable win in Drew Brees' absence.
Yeah, Sean Payton's done a hell of a coaching job there. Just before I move off this one, Brad, what's the official professor play here? Because obviously, I was just thinking back to last Thursday, your best bet of the week. What did you do? You did Seattle -1 or 1.5. That was a pretty tough one. So you're in a similar spot here. Would you just play the Jaguars in the money line at 1.87?
No, I would still play the -2.5. We shouldn't be too changed in our approach by what happened in one game, as upsetting as it was. So yeah, I'd go Jags -2.5.
Good man. Right, guys, we're heading towards the finish here. Let's take a look. I don't know if any of you guys have actually played this one, but I suppose we definitely have to look at the game in London this week. The Carolina Panthers and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the designated home team at Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. They are the underdogs in this one. 2.21. Carolina Panthers 1.78. Point spread at the moment. Tampa +2.5. 1.94, 47.5 is the total. Brad, maybe I'll start with you. You're kind of the local on this one. Anything looking at you? But by the way, just before we get into it, great. 1/2 kickoff. Fantastic.
Yeah, no, great. I look forward to plopping down in front of that and having a little trade and go on that. That's why I like the London game, because I'm normally in bed for these standalone games. So it's nice to be able to actually watch and enjoy a whole game and trade on it and stuff. So I look forward to that. I've not bet it yet. A few talking points, I think. The leaving time, so Panthers went early, Tampa went late. Now, Tampa will be late. They're going to try and get there less than 48 hours before the game. There's also some some debate about what's actually better to do. Belichick historically has tried to leave it as late as possible, kind of fly in, play the game, fly out kind of thing. Try and just avoid jet lag completely by not adjusting. But then last week, the Bears went late and they looked like they slept through the first half, and the Raiders went early and looked sharper. So I don't really know what to make of that, to be honest. The price move, there's been a move towards Carolina. And I think there might be a shade of value in the Buccaneers. If you look at Kyle Allen's QBR, obviously he was undrafted and he came out in his first game, 85 QBR against the Cardinals, tore them up 4 touchdowns. Then that's down to 46 in his next game and then down to 30 this week. So it does seem a bit like the league is getting tape on him and catching up, and they're reliant on McCaffrey, which they were last week against the Jags. But obviously this Bucs defense is probably the best in the league against the run, for whatever we can trust in that number. But then on the Bucs side, I think that there's injuries in the interior offensive line which worry me. So I would wait for an injury report on that. But if it gets to 3, I think I would have a little play on the Bucs. All
right, Drew, anything on this?
I've gone back and forth. I could make a case for either team or either side here. It's really tough because these two teams just played each other week 2, and you would think you could take something from that matchup and use it in this handicap, but it was a weird game where Carolina probably should have eked out a win at home, even though Cam Newton was throwing with a limited shoulder and a bad Lisfranc injury apparently. So it was a no doubt under spot week 2. I could make a case for an under in this game as well, because I would expect that with the usage we saw from McCaffrey last week, that he's going to be a little bit tougher to come by yards and points this week after having been kind of beaten up and then have go through a pretty egregious travel schedule this week. So I would expect that since they're a little bit limited, one-dimensional on offense in terms of leaning on him, that this is a tougher go for the Panthers this week. As far as scoring points go, but their defense is carrying them to a degree. They're not asking Kyle Allen to do much. His passing yards are going down week by week here, and the defense is carrying more of the load. This could be a setup where they get a win just on the basis of defense.
All right, guys, I'm almost out of time. Adam Chernoff, very quickly, anything on this one?
Yeah, we can almost repeat that week 2 spot. Panthers in that from just a pure power rating perspective based on the number. They were 3.5 points better now in the neutral. We're seeing them 2, so slight adjustment for Tampa. I think that's fair. McCaffrey usage was the issue in that game. Bucs defense, I think, far and away number 1 in terms of stopping the run up front. He was utilized heavy in that game against the Rams, was the key guy in that one. Week 2 really struggled. Now you get the same situation. Huge usage last week. Has to fly a bit of a short week over to London. Prep time changes. That becomes a bit of an issue. Same rematch, bit of an adjustment for the Bucs. Kyle Allen, numbers going down, but also his ability to spread the ball going down. His receivers that have caught at least 35 yards. It went from 5 in his first start. That decreased, and now last week we're looking where McCaffrey ends up as leading receiver. Only one other guy over 50 yards, so him being able to spread it out becoming a bit of a concern. Probably a fair number overall, though, when you look at just how the adjustments changed since week 2. There was money that came in late against the Panthers last week. Surprised to see it go up a little bit this week, but it was just adjusting to sort of what that rating is at Pick'em, little O. Now I think it's pretty fair.
Come on, Brad, very quickly, Mick, you want to come back in there? We just got to go to best bets very quickly, if you don't mind.
Very quick. I think under could be worth a look. Second meeting quite soon after the first one. As I say, injuries to Tampa's O-line and Kyle Allen regressing, so under 47.5 could be a look.
All right. Tentative vote for the under. Right, guys, let's go to the quad box. Let's do best bets. Like I said, apologies for rushing, but I think I picked one too many games this week. God damn that London game. Right, in 10 words or less, best bet of the week. Drew Dinsick, I will start with you, sir.
All right, so I'm gonna make a case for Tennessee to win outright.
Tennessee to win outright. I'll get your thoughts on that off air. Brad Allen.
It's a terrible look. But this is just a terrible spot for Denver. The worst spot in the world. They got Thursday Night Football against the hated Chiefs coming up. They just got their first win of the season after playing super hard week in, week out. This is Tennessee.
You're going to kill me. I got to stay under the hour. Brad Allen, what have you got?
I'll take the over in the Niners game.
Adam Chernoff.
Cardinals Falcons over 51.
Okay, mine is Cincinnati Bengals plus 11.5. I'm out of here. We're done. Thank you for listening. That doesn't give me the opportunity to explain it. Thanks be to God. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. We'll chat to you next week.